Cheers! Welcome to Spirits on the Rocks.
I'm Ashley, resident witch and spooky storyteller.
And I'm Kris, bartender and sassy skeptic.
And together, we're going to bring you plenty of magic, mystery, and a little bit of spirits.
Ooh.
We love to have fun here, but we should warn you that today's story contains some upsetting imagery, including a plane crash and some violent deaths.
Take care of yourself.
So, Kris, how's your week been, babe?
My week has been okay.
Yeah.
I had a pretty rough day yesterday, as you know. We won't get into it here, but hey, we're fucking pushing forward. It's all good. And honestly, I'm doing pretty good today.
Yeah.
Like, I feel pretty good.
Good.
So,
Good. How was Christmas?
my Christmas was nice. I just, I have a pretty small family. It's just me and my parents. So we just, sat around, opened presents, ate a lot of food, drank a lot. Like my mom and I have this tradition where we make a double batch of champagne punch.
Ooh,
and kill the entire thing between the two of us. Sometimes my dad will have a cup. He didn't even have one this year, but we just fucking go to town. And it's my favorite thing.
I love this Christmas tradition.
Yes.
I feel like we need to implement this, but I do not have a small family. We're grossly outnumbered. So with 5 kids, it's a different vibe.
Yeah, but how was your Christmas?
Well, it was great. As my sister passed away in December of 2024. And last year on Christmas, the kids had not yet come to live with us. They came to live with us the day after Christmas because she passed away on December 15th. So this was our first Christmas with all 5 of them. And I think it was so healing. It was really great. The kids all had a really good time. And then we went to see my husband's family and spent a few days there with cousins and just had a really good time. And the best thing that I did was nothing.
God bless it.
Mm-hmm.
Doing nothing is like a big hobby of mine. Like,
Big
it's
fan.
the best thing. Big fan.
Yeah, I don't do nothing very often, but when I do, it is lovely.
It's just the best.
It truly is.
There's nothing like being bored.
I cannot say that that's a sensation I've been very familiar with of late.
Yeah.
But, I know that's coming because I'm taking my oldest off to college in August.
Yeah.
And it's kind of like once that bubble pops, my understanding is that time just seems to move so much quicker. Definitely senior year has moved really quickly. So I know that the day will come when I am bored and I'm going to miss this. But, right now I am joyfully not bored. But I look forward to the days when I am bored again. That's going to be beautiful in its own way.
Cheers to that. So do you have any New Year's resolutions?
Okay, so we observe the 13 magical nights.
Okay.
And if you're not familiar with the 13 magical nights, I highly recommend checking out the Glasgow Witch. She does a beautiful explanation of this, and she just has such a lovely presence to her. But we observe this where on the nights leading into Samhain, you write down the 13 pieces of paper. Each night you write down an intention for the coming year in the present, like I have, blah, blah, blah.
Right.
And then starting on the solstice on 21st, you burn one each night and you release that to the universe. And you're like, I trust that this is coming to fruition for me in this year.
Okay.
And then the 13th night, you open one and read it. And that is the one that is yours to work on. And of course, the one that I actually have to work on, being healthy.
Oh.
Yeah.
So is it like a randomly let the spirits guide you type?
Absolutely. You
choice?
can't even peek. You can't even peek. You fold them up and then you burn them each night and you release that like, okay, I'm giving this, I'm trusting the universe and my guides that this will come to fruition. But that last one it's yours to own, to really pour into. And my husband and I both got the same one, and it was like, I'm healthy, I'm fit, I feel good, because I'm not really interested in weight loss. I'm interested in feeling strong and healthy. And I'm not going to tell you how many brownies I ate today.
You don't?
Hey, but there is no bad foods.
There's no bad foods. And you could argue that junk food, like brownies and sweets and the like,
Yeah.
are brain healthy.
Yeah.
At least that's what I
Dopamine.
tell myself when I eat like a fucking garbage man. I eat so poorly, but eating sweets and,
It is a
yummy,
dopamine
delicious
hit.
foods, it's brain healthy. And so I would count that as a healthy food.
Yeah.
And if
In
that's
moderation.
just me sipping on that copium, glorp, glorp. For those of you who don't know,
I got that reference.
Yes, thank
I
you.
got that reference.
For those of you who don't know, that is a Dungeon Crawler Carl reference.
Fun book. Thank you for getting me turned on to that.
You're so welcome.
I'm loving it. It's really fun.
So you're on the second book, right?
I am on the second book. I'm really, I use the audiobooks a lot because I'm in my car a lot for my job and I'm driving between clients. And so that's a great time to listen. I listen to it, at night, they get to wind down. Although my poor family probably hears me going, like through the house when Princess Donut says something hilarious.
Oh my God, which she is wont to do. It's just such a funny book. Matt Dinneman, fucking...
He nailed it.
Great work. I know you're watching.
I was so nervous about some possible, I was like, ooh, this feels like a racial stereotype. And then I realized what he's doing is he's taking those stereotypes and he's making fun of that stereotype, turning it on its head. And he's doing it to so many groups. It's almost like South Park, but it's not like a direct mocking. It's like this really clever commentary on how we all think that our way of thinking is correct.
Yeah.
It's really clever.
Good.
But anyway, we digress. So we do have a really fun new series for y'all. We are going to be telling you a little bit about it, and we have the perfect on-brand drink. Kris, what are we drinking here?
So tonight we're drinking an aviation.
Which is perfect because we're going to be talking all about haunted aviation for several weeks. So you wanna show us how to make this?
Yeah, totally. Here we go. Here's how you make an aviation. Into a shaker tin, add 2 ounces of gin, half an ounce of creme de violet, half an ounce of Luxardo maraschino liqueur, and half an ounce of fresh squeezed lemon juice. Add your ice and shake. Strain into a martini glass and express the peel of a lemon over your glass, rub it around that rim, and plop it in. And there you have it, a delicious aviation. Ashley started talking about having a song stuck in her head and needing a new one. And it just reminded me, I was at the gas station earlier just getting whatever, and Total Eclipse of the Heart was playing on the radio. And because my brain is broken, that song gets stuck in my head, but specifically as if Cher was singing it. Not the real version, just every now and then I get a little bit terrified until I see the look in your eyes.
Just your own headcanon of Cher
Every
singing.
now and then I fall apart.
And I need you now tonight.
And I need you more than ever. And that is legit gets and I don't know why, but that's just what my brain does.
Oh my God. I love that you have your own Cher recorded version of Total Eclipse of the Heart just playing in your head.
That's not the only song for that. But yes, there's just a Cher filter in my brain.
I love you. That's the gayest shit you've ever said.
But hey, long fucking live Cher.
Oh my God.
That's just my brain.
All I can think about is the episode of Will and Grace where Jack meets Cher.
Yes. And he's like, excuse me, sir.
You're not that impressive, Mr. Sister.
Mr. Sister. And then he's like, I'm Cher. Oh. Oh my God.
She goes, get a life.
Yeah. Oh my God. God bless Cher for having that sense of humor.
She is great. She's great. She's such an icon.
But yeah, I just I don't know why.
You are not that great, Mr. Sister. One of my favorite lines ever. Oh my gosh. Okay, now my stomach hurts from laughing. Oh.
So, Ashley, why are we drinking?
Well, Kris, today we are drinking because it's really sad when a flight goes down, but it's nice to know that sometimes people live on.
Do they really?
They do. They do. And today we're going to talk about it. This might be something that you've heard of before. It is the story of the Eastern Airlines Flight 401. Now, this happened, it's December 29th, 1972, and we are going from New York to Miami. Eastern Airlines Flight 401 was on what was called a L-1011. Now, this was built by McDonnell Douglas. For those of us who remember sort of the aviation race of like the 80s and the 90s, apparently this started in the 70s. I wasn't alive then, but apparently it started in the 70s. And you had these like giants trying to like build the next big plane, right? So
I just had a brave little toaster moment and imagined like
back to the brave little toaster.
Okay.
It all comes full circle.
Full circle.
So you have McDonnell Douglas. They're building the L-1011, but then the Boeing 747 was the plane that ended up kind of like eclipsing it in the market. So, and the L-1011 was actually made by Lockheed Martin. So this plane goes to take off, very routine flight, going from New York to Miami. So this plane had on it a total of 176 occupants. And of those, 4 of them were the crew. And passengers, there were 163. And then the rest were flight attendants and people like that who were working. So I guess it was technically 13 that were crew, but 4 were in the cockpit. So we're going to start off with the crew. We have Captain Bob. I'm not kidding. Robert Loft. Yes, his name is Captain Bob.
And Loft. Air.
Oh, he was aloft. You are correct. Captain Bob was, he was a seasoned pilot. He was 55 at the time of this flight, and he had logged something like just under 30,000 flight hours. So this is a man who knew what he was doing. He'd been flying for like 30 years, and he'd logged about 280 hours on the L-1011. So this is a man who was pretty familiar with this plane that was still, fairly new at the time. He was described as very conscientious, very stalwart. He was very reliable. And the way that I heard people describe him, the picture in my head I see is like Mark Kelly.
Okay.
Like astronaut. He's very confident and he's very in control, but not an asshole. And he is very calm, but he is not a pushover, just sort of that like steady, reliable kind of guy. Very methodical, very trustworthy. These are all things you want in a pilot, right? Now, he was married. He had children at the time, which is sad because, as we know, this plane's going to go down.
Yeah.
Now, when they get into the cockpit, you have the pilot flying and the pilot monitoring. Captain Bob, he was the pilot flying, so he was in the left-hand seat in the cockpit. Now, in the right-hand seat, you have the first officer. First officer's name was Bert Stockstill. Now, he was only 39 at the time of the flight, but he was served at the pilot monitoring. And he was not as experienced as Captain Bob, of course, because he was only 39, but he was still a well-trained and well-experienced pilot in his own right, had just shy of something like 6,000 flight hours. So again, he's another very trustworthy, earnest, very procedural, very focused pilot, exactly the qualities you want in the person flying your plane. So the next person that we have is the flight engineer. Now, I interviewed...
Ernie?
That would be great.
Bert, that was dumb. Anyway.
No, it took me a minute to catch up. I was like, no, his name's Don. Where did Ernie come from? God, that would be great if it was Bob, Bert, and Ernie.
Bob, Bert, and Ernie.
Bob, Bert, and Ernie. That sounds like a Cartoon Network show, doesn't it? I'm thinking of Ed, Edd and Eddy.
Oh, yeah.
Which was funny.
I wouldn't know. I wasn't allowed to watch that show.
You missed out.
I missed out on a lot of shit.
Well, but you were really young when that was on. I was like in middle school, high school when that came out.
I wasn't allowed, like, if it wasn't on Nick Jr. Are you telling us to get back on track?
No, I'm whistling the theme.
Oh, okay.
I wondered. I was like, what?
I was allowed to watch that show.
It was funny.
I
Ed
was
always
not.
running with his arms like way back here. So
Yeah, if it wasn't on like Nick Jr. or Disney Channel or like Boomerang, I basically wasn't allowed to watch it.
I was so used to Cartoon Network being just a given. Apparently, it's not, because I got my cable box when I first moved into my current apartment. Because it was like,
you have cable?
the apartment pays for a package that comes with internet and cable.
Nice.
That's great.
Except I only took the box. It's like, fuck yeah, I'll take it. I'll watch some Cartoon Network. No, you have to pay extra for Cartoon Network.
Oh, that's gay.
Not as gay as Bert and Ernie.
Right?
So then we have our 51-year-old flight engineer, which is Don Repo. He was basically the system specialist, so to speak, and he was sitting behind the pilot monitoring, which was Bert. So I talked with an actual pilot
Yes, you did.
to prepare for this episode. My father-in-law flew for the Navy and then flew for FedEx for like 35 years. And he flew the DC-10, very similar to the 1011. So
Right.
basically, like you had the Boeing 747, you had the Lockheed Martin L-1011, and then you had the DC-10, which was McDonnell Douglas. So like that was kind of like what you had, the three that were competing. They were all very similar size, similar function, so on and so forth. So he flew DC-10s for years. So he was very helpful in helping me understand kind of how all this fit together. And basically, pilot flying, Captain Bob. Pilot monitoring, First Officer Bert. And then right behind First Officer Bert, you have your flight engineer, your system specialist, and that's Don Repo. And then, in addition, you have this fourth guy that jumps on the flight who actually wasn't planned to be there, but he was doing a jump seat flight. You know what a jump seat flight is?
No.
Okay, so jump seat is basically when you have an extra space in the cockpit and a pilot needs to get to, or a crew member, someone who works with the airline, needs to get from point A to point B. They don't pay for a ticket. They
so
jump
just-
in.
Okay, that works.
They jump on the seat. Jump seat.
Oh, you know what? That kind of tracks because I know that my uncle is a pilot.
Oh.
And sometimes, so I remember that was a whole thing growing up of like, whenever he wanted to fly somewhere, he'd kind of be like, all right, well, I gotta see if I can get on a flight today. Like, you know.
If you could jump seat.
Yeah, if you could jump seat. I
Yep.
just didn't know the term.
Yep,
So.
that's what it is. It is a jump seat. But next to Don Repo, you have the technical officer, which was Angelo Donadeo. And he was 47 at this time. And he was actually like a technical officer in his own right. He was occupying that jump seat. And basically, spoiler alert, he's the only one out of the four that survived.
Oof.
And he wasn't even supposed to originally be there, but so he got just riddled with survivor's guilt, as you can imagine.
Oh, yeah.
We also had a bunch of, like I said, flight attendants. Most of them were very seasoned. They knew what they were doing. We know who we've got in the cockpit. We know who's flying this plane. So what the hell happened? So
Well, nothing good.
Nothing good. So we're going to go through sort of the entire just timeline of what happened.
Beautiful.
My father-in-law was very helpful. He pulled up the crash report and actually went through it with me. And believe it or not, he was in flight school in the early 80s and they reviewed this crash. This was one of the things that they went over in school.
I mean, that would make sense because, you know, this is a true, like a iconic. Is iconic a good word for something when it's like really bad? I feel like iconic has a positive connotation. High
profile, yeah.
Yeah, because iconic.
Landmark.
Yeah, landmark. Iconic has a really good connotation, and I don't know if I feel comfortable saying that about a plane crash. Iconic.
Yeah, it is not iconic, but it
Yeah.
is landmark. It is definitely one that has been studied, and we'll learn why. So basically, from like 8:30 to 9 o'clock, everything is very routine. They're doing their routine pre-flight inspections. Everything went as expected, and then they are pushing back from the gate at JFK at 9:20 p.m. You know, pushback just means like they're headed out to the tarmac, right? To go out and wait for their turn. So they actually take off from JFK between 9:30 and 9:35, and after they climb out and they reach altitude, they engage the autopilot. Like you do. That's apparently very routine, very typical. and they conducted what's called a descent briefing. I didn't know that this was a thing, but apparently, like each phase of the flight, you do a briefing and you do a plan and then you execute that plan. And the way that my father-in-law explained this is there are so many pieces that go into a flight and they are so precise that you have to have a whole row of dominoes fall before something goes really wrong. And this is a perfect example of all the dominoes falling. So they've conducted their like descent briefing, they're prepared, and they actually start descending towards Miami. They're doing their final approach, nose gear is down, it's locked into position, and they have a little problem. So you've got these 3 sets of wheels, right? You've got the ones right under the nose and then on the back on each side. So there's a little light on the, I don't know, can we call it a dashboard or like the control panel?
Sure.
And it's supposed to light up and let you know that they are engaged. Well, the back 2 engaged and that light, those lights came on, but on the front it did not. And so they keep it in autopilot and they're like, okay, we're cleared for descent. We're trying to get in. And they were like, okay, well, this is not lighting up and letting us know that this landing gear is engaged. It's got to be the bulb, right? It's probably not the landing gear. Like that doesn't actually happen. There's so many things that would have to go wrong for it to actually happen. So they go and they're like, well, let's go check this bulb. Well, that's when they just decided we're going to put it in a holding pattern about 2,000 feet over the Everglades, and we're going to figure this out. Now, here's the thing. Apparently, when you are over the Everglades, it is pitch black. I don't mean like it's dark. Apparently, you look out and there's nothing to guide you but your instruments because there's no light for miles and miles and miles.
I mean, that tracks. The Everglades are like this ginormous, just massive swamp where, can't really build anything there. So
it's just miles and miles and miles and miles. And apparently, when you're flying into it, coming into Miami, you see absolutely nothing. So they say, we're going to hold at 2,000 feet. We're going to figure out what's going on with this landing gear.
Right.
So they all go down and they're like, okay, we're going to figure out what's going on with this little like light that's not coming on. So they go down into what's called the hellhole, which is underneath the cockpit. And that's where like all like the technical gear and stuff is, lots of mechanical stuff. And apparently they call it the hellhole because it gets really hot down there. So Bob has got it in autopilot and he winds up going down to help. So,
and I had also, not to cut you off, but speaking of autopilot, this flight was like a kind of like a test run for autopilot.
Yeah, it was called the CMS system.
Yeah, and like it was still pretty new, and they were still kind of figuring out how autopilot worked when this flight went up, which probably adds to, that's one of them dominoes.
One of the dominoes, yes, for sure. So the first person that goes down is Don Repo because he's the flight engineer. That's his job, right? We don't have flight engineers anymore because so much of it is automated. And there are definitely pilots that argue that it would be beneficial to go back to having a 3-person crew with that flight engineer on board. But at the time, this was standard. So Don Repo goes down and he's like, I'm going to take a look at this. Well, the technical officer who was on the flight, he decides, I'm going to go down and I'm going to help him and try and figure out what's going on. And so they should have actually, I learned, been able to take a flashlight, and there should have been a spot that if they'd had a light, they should have been able to look and actually see where the landing gear had fully engaged or disengaged, whichever. Yeah. I think it would be engaged, where it had fully gone into place. But they did not have a flashlight. So something as simple as a flashlight became another domino in this string of dominoes that fell. Well, at this point, we don't just have Don down there and the technical officer, Angelo. We now have Bert has come to help and Captain Bob. Well, unfortunately, when Captain Bob got up, they think that he knocked the autopilot hard enough that it knocked it out of autopilot. Nobody noticed because the pilot monitoring wasn't monitoring. He was actually down in the hellhole trying to help with this issue. And it should never have been all of them. That was the problem. They were all so focused on this little light bulb that none of them caught that the autopilot had disengaged and they were slowly descending. Not towards the airport.
That's not supposed to happen.
No. Can you imagine how horrible? Oh my God. So they get this alert that the aircraft has passed 1,000 feet. And they get a proximity warning saying, hey, you're about to crash. So they go in, they try and pull back, and it's too late. They crash. So ATC lost contact at 23:55, 5 minutes before midnight. They knew something was terribly wrong. So imagine this. Imagine you're sitting in the Everglades. It's midnight. You're out on your airboat in the middle of the Everglades with your buddy, gigging some frogs.
As you do.
Very Florida. And out
So
in
many frogs.
so many frogs. Frogs?
And scorpions and
Palmetto
lizards
bugs.
and snakes. You ever just
Are you okay? Is this bringing some stuff up for you?
You ever just take a towel, like a bath towel from the rack and just find a scorpion in it? That's a thing.
Can't say that
I always say this, Florida is like the Australia of the United States.
It very much is.
Like there's the creepy crawlers down there. Don't get me started. I could do a whole fucking
the stuff up
45-minute episode about the crazy, just the wildlife. Not even talking about the people. That's a different classification of wildlife.
Now it really is. But I will say, while Florida is the Australia of the United States, Australians are just British Texans.
Yeah. oh my God. That is so fucking true.
It's true. I cannot remember where I saw it, but I was like, that's accurate. That is so accurate. So, but anyway, these Florida men were out there gigging frogs at midnight, and it was Bud Marquis and Ray Dickinson. And they see off in the distance this giant ball of fire that illuminated the sky for a few seconds.
Goodness gracious. Great ball of fire.
Literally. And then it goes away, and they're like, well, I don't know what that was, but it looks like whoever's over there is going to need some help. So these, to their credit, they turn their airboat and they book it towards the ball of fire. But it goes out really quickly, so they just have to keep going in the same general direction. In the pitch black. So honestly, it's a freaking miracle that they found them.
Yeah. Plus, you're like in the Everglades. So there's all sorts of like trees and like shit you're trying to run through and fucking swamp water. Like you're.
And it took them a while to get there. They were ways off. It took them like 30, 40 minutes to get over there. So by the time they get there, the Everglades, it's the swamp. And so basically it exploded, and the water immediately put out the fire.
Thank goodness.
Yeah. Well, it was still pretty rough. So they immediately start pulling survivors out of the water, and they're trying to pull people out of the wreckage. Some of the things they found were horrifying. Like there was one man who was covered in burns, and he was still in his seat floating in the water, but like his head kept dunking under the water.
Oh my God.
Yeah. And like he was burned so bad, like the seatbelt was like burned into him. Yeah. Horrifying stuff. I wasn't kidding about that trigger warning. It was pretty bad. So these airboats saved a lot of people's lives because they got there before the actual rescuers did. Because at air traffic control, they lost communication, and it was kind of a scramble trying to get the Coast Guard there and figure out what was going on. And of course, by the time they got people to firmer ground, some of those people had passed, but they did save some lives, because if they had not gotten out there sooner, there are some people, like the guy who was bobbing in his seat, he probably would have drowned. When they went over and they started rescuing people from the water, this was not without risk. They actually sustained fuel burns to their skin. Wow. Yeah, they actually sustained some pretty significant injuries, but they didn't stop. Even with all the pain that they were in, they kept pulling people out of the water, kept making sure that they were getting them to safety. And man, hats off to Bud Marquis and Ray Dickinson. That is truly heroic behavior.
Period. Hats off to you. And then I just removed my scalp. Hats off.
So our frog giggers get out there, and they get out there about maybe it varies by account, but usually they say they got out there about 30 minutes after the crash, and it took like another 30-45 minutes for like fire, EMS, law enforcement, Coast Guard, all of them to actually get their established staging zones and get the rescue underway. Like the Coast Guard helicopter didn't even get there by some accounts until like 1:30 in the morning. Yeah, because I mean they're trying to find them in the middle of the pitch black, and so it was really difficult. It wasn't a lack of response time. They responded quickly, but how do you find people in the middle of the pitch black with limited radio equipment? Because this is the early 70s. So then you get Frank Borman coming in. So Frank,
My homeboy. That was so stupid. Okay.
so Frank Borman is the leadership from Eastern Airlines. He shows up sometime between 1 and 2 a.m., which, I mean, good on him for showing up. I mean, it's his job, but, you know, nowadays, you know, it's iffy if leadership is going to show up and take accountability. It's not really a thing. You know.
Accountability?
Yeah, no. So Frank Borman, he's notified sometime between 1 and 2 a.m. of what's going on. And to his credit, he gets there sometime between 2 and 3. I mean, he hustled, got there, made sure he was on site. Can you imagine today somebody being there to actually address the situation and not just worry about the PR?
No, because worrying about the PR these days is addressing the situation.
Right.
Like,
which, I mean, obviously he's going to be worried about the PR as well, because you do want to make sure that you're handling the narrative well so that you don't have a bunch of rumors flying. But at the same time, like,
You
Frank
have to give
Borman-
out your torts and pears.
your torch and prayer. But
what?
Frank, your torts and prayers.
Oh.
Thoughts and prayers. Your
Okay, see.
torch and pears.
I was like, what the fuck is a torts and pear? I'm picturing like a fruit. Like, what is a storm?
I've seen tots and pears, but same thing.
I meant to say tarts and pears, but my mind went to torts first, and I don't know why.
I was tracking with you, my man.
Honestly, I feel like I would have been more confused by tarts and pears.
I mean,
now
a tort.
So
Tort is a legal term. A tort is a complaint.
Yep.
So.
Yep. Which kind of makes sense. So, but here's the thing about Frank. Frank didn't just show up and like worry about what he was going to say on camera. He's pulling people out of the water.
He's fucking doing the work.
He's legit. He's legit. And I'm not sanctifying the man. I'm just saying he did the work. And good on Frank.
Good on Frank.
Good on Frank.
My boy.
You're my boy, Frank.
My boy Frank.
I was about to ask if you've seen Old School, but no, you haven't.
Girl, I ain't seen shit.
I know. This man does not watch movies. So between 2 and like 5 a.m. is when they're got people continually arriving, helping, pulling people out of the water and from the crash site. Between 6 and 9 a.m. is when we hit daybreak. And that's when they see the full debris field and they get a really full idea of, oh my gosh, this is what we're really dealing with here. So they sort of expand their searches to make sure that they confirm that they've got everybody and that there's no survivors that would be likely. And then on the morning of December 30th, rescue moved into recovery. And that's the sad moment when you know we're not looking for people, we're looking for bodies. The NTSB comes in and they start conducting their initial investigation of the actual crash site.
What's the NTSB?
The National Transportation Safety Board. Now, this process I learned through talking with my father-in-law is an extremely detailed, extremely grueling process. Anytime there's a crash, they try to recreate second by second what happened.
Oh, wow.
They will literally take the entire airplane, every single part that they can find. I mean, down to any little screw, any little piece of fiber, anything they can find. They will take it to an empty warehouse and they will reverse engineer the whole thing to see if they can figure out what went wrong. It is extraordinarily detailed. I can't even fathom this process. Really,
Yeah.
it's incredible. So NTSB has begun their on-site work, which is collecting every single tiny scrap that they can find and evaluating the scatter patterns and what went wrong, things like that. Things that honestly cannot understand, and there are going to be other folks on YouTube who can do a much better job of explaining this process to you.
That's above our pay grade. We talk about ghosts.
It's the truth. It's the truth. But I want to do my father-in-law proud because he did spend a great deal of time talking through this with me. And, I'm just saying we can't rule out the possibility that he might join us at some point this season.
I'm down.
It would be really great. Another person that we really need to commend is Petty Officer Don Schneck with the U.S. Coast Guard. This man was a rescue swimmer, and he was out there literally diving through finding pieces of people.
Ooh.
That is a horrible job. But can you imagine if that's your loved one and you didn't know what happened to them?
No, yeah, you at least have some like closure.
Something. Yeah, something of them to bury, to say goodbye to.
Yeah.
That's horrible. He said that you could see hands waving in the grass. And some of those were people needing to be rescued, but sometimes it was people who didn't make it. So it's pretty horrible. When all is said and done, 101 people died, 75 survived. And of those who passed away, that included Captain Bob, First Officer Bert, and our flight engineer, Don Repo, the one who was trying to fix the problem to begin with. So as we talked about, it was just dominoes that fell.
Yeah.
But the main issue was that you had crew that was not paying attention because they were distracted by another issue. But in order for that issue to happen, you had to have a light bulb that was out. And in order for that light bulb to go out, like, it should have been replaced much sooner. And then if they'd had the flashlight, they would have been able to see that the landing gear was fully engaged. And then that would have meant that Captain Bob wouldn't have needed to leave his seat. And it was just a string of absolutely unfortunate events. So Frank Borman,
My boy.
your boy Frank, the Eastern Airlines executive, Frank was kind of a badass in his own right.
Agreed.
I mean, this man, he wasn't just like some tie that showed up. He wasn't just another suit on the scene. Dude was a freaking astronaut.
Yeah. And like an expert in all of this.
Mm-hmm. So apparently he was like the senior vice president of operations for Eastern Airlines at the time. I cannot think of someone who deserves that role more really than Frank Borman.
100%.
And what I like about Frank,
Let's be frank.
Frank not only helped with the rescue, he actually accompanied people to the hospital and stayed with people who waited for their families to arrive. This is a good dude. Like I said, executives today would never. So,
Girl.
but he said it was absolute chaos, but here he was in the chaos being the calm.
Yeah.
So good on you, Frank. Good on you. But I love while he said, I wasn't going to sit in an office while people were dying in the field.
Where is that today?
We love Frank. We need more Frank.
We need more Frank. Be Frank. Let's be frank.
Be the Frank. Let's be Frank.
Let's be frank.
Be the Frank in the world, guys. Be the Frank.
Be the Frank in the world you want to see.
But I will say, of the things that came next, Frank was maybe a little more than vocally opposed to the stories that came up. We love Frank in a crisis.
My boy.
But we maybe don't love Frank's response to people who were saying they were experiencing certain things in airplanes much later.
Speak for yourself.
Well, I mean, maybe he went a little overboard. But I don't think it was just Frank's decision either. I think there were a lot of people who were involved in this.
There were also, a lot of people involved with Eastern Airlines worked very hard to dispel any sort of haunting rumors, but none of that's credible because they're just like trying to get that off their reputation. Like that's
absolutely.
Yeah.
And this, we got to remember, this is at the time when The Exorcist came out and the Satanic Panic was kind of kicking in.
Yeah.
So
No, they absolutely did not want that attached to their business. They fully had motive to decry those stories. So I did not include that in my research because that's just a company looking out for its own ass and nothing more.
Right. Well, and like I said, this happened December 29th, 1972. And all the haunting rumors started, within a year or two. And The Exorcist came out December 26th, 1973.
Yes.
So this was right in the middle of this zeitgeist moment of pushing back against any stories of hauntings as like a satanic thing or something that was, it was very countercultural.
Yeah.
So it is pretty standard practice. And this is another thing that I talked with my father-in-law about. It is standard practice if you have a very expensive aircraft and you have a crash. Even after a crash, oftentimes you have parts, even small parts, that can be extremely expensive, but are still functional, perfectly functional after a crash. So they will be repurposed and put in other planes.
Oh, yeah.
Pretty standard practice. So there is definitely some thoughts that maybe this happened with this crash, and that might have led to some of the unusual events that happened aboard other L-1011s.
Oh. Do tell.
Well, the most famous is probably the gallery oven reflection incident. And this was our boy Don Repo. This was our flight engineer. So basically what happened here is you have another flight with an L-1011. And this is, of course, with Eastern Airlines. And it's in regular passenger service. So this happened during the cruise phase, which is, remember, where you've gone up to altitude, you're just kind of cruising until you have to descend, right? So this is in the rear of the plane. This is like in the gallery, or the galley, where they're preparing meals to bring out and things like that. And this flight attendant, she's performing like her routine galley duties, and she sees a face reflecting in the galley oven, and it takes her a minute to realize that's not me. And she realized that it was this man, and he was standing very still. Initially, she thought it might have actually been the other flight attendant, and then she realizes that it's not. Later on, she actually realized this was Don Repo after she looked at some pictures and went, wait a minute, that's the man that I saw. Now, apparently, he was fully formed. She could see his full face, sort of what you would call corporeal form.
Right.
She said it wasn't like a distortion. There was no transparency. He didn't look like a ghost. It looked like a human being just standing there, just like you or I am right now. Apparently, this is the part that I think is so cool. He looked at her and said, "Watch out for fire on this plane." It's an oddly specific thing to say, right?
Right.
And why would you make that up? The first flight attendant who saw him and heard him say this screamed and collapsed. The second flight attendant saw all of this happen. So you have two witnesses. And apparently he just disappeared just as abruptly as he had appeared. What's really interesting is that on this plane, there actually was an issue with something overheating that could have caused a really significant issue, and the plane actually had to be diverted and landed early.
Wow.
Pretty cool. Pretty cool. So I think that that story to me is not so much spooky as it is kind of sweet and comforting.
Of allegedly this ghost just kind of watching out for.
Especially because it's somebody who in life, the final thing that happened to him was a lot of people died because he made a mistake, and he wanted to make sure it didn't happen again. It's really kind of sweet and sad.
Yeah.
So our second sighting is also our boy Don Repo, our flight engineer. And apparently on this flight, there was knocking coming from the hellhole beneath the cockpit.
Really?
Yes. And so the crew's like, what is this knocking? And it just wouldn't stop. So they go and they open up the hellhole, and they see Don Repo just standing there looking up at them. But this time he doesn't say anything. So apparently the crew go down into the hellhole, and sure enough, what do you think they find?
Nothing. I just gotta.
They did find an electrical fault, and they were able to correct it because they caught it early.
Oh.
And there was yet a third instance, and again, it's our boy Don Repo. Apparently he appeared in the cockpit. This is really sweet. He appeared in the cockpit with a new pilot, one of his first flights, and he's really nervous, and he says, "You don't need to worry about this flight. We've taken care of it."
Aww.
And he didn't realize who it was. He just came in, sat down next to him, said this, and left. and nobody knew who it was until later he realized it was Don Repo. Now, I find really interesting that Eastern Airlines, it's not like they just discouraged people from talking about this. They actively suppressed it and even fired people who talked about it.
There was a whole lawsuit. Well, not I don't think there was a lawsuit, but there was,
Legal threats, for
yes.
sure.
Oh, absolutely. Dealing with how a lot of these stories broke out.
So that's pretty much what I've got for the hauntings.
So, I've actually done a bit of my own research.
Oh, you researched?
Yes, I did.
Oh, there'd be no living with him now.
I know. Look at me. I'm acting brand new. I've done some research on these ghost stories, and a lot of these stories seem to originate from John G. Fuller's book, The Ghost of Flight 401. John G. Fuller has some questionable credibility. He wrote a lot in the 70s and 80s about UFOs and about ghosts and about a lot of supernatural things. And I'm not saying that people who write about those things are automatically not credible, but a lot of what he wrote about, especially with like UFOs and stuff, were discredited. And honestly, a lot of information generally out there about UFOs isn't super found in science anyway. Not saying that there isn't possibility of other life out there, or maybe even the possibility of them interacting with us on Earth. Although there are a lot of scientists who say that humans are likely the only intelligent life in the universe. But that's a whole different topic.
One we can certainly broach.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's one that's fascinating to me. Absolutely. I actually really love like space and everything like that. But anyway,
other dimensions.
Fuller's writings aren't really necessarily to be trusted. The fact that a lot of these seem to generate from his book gives me pause. Not only was Fuller's credibility dubious at best, but also Robert Serling authored a book called From the Captain to the Colonel. And he kind of did some of his own digging into the ghost stories and some of the claims made. And according to his findings, none of the employees of Eastern Airlines believed in any of the ghost stories. Serling had found that a lot of those employees were actually upset with Fuller for kind of sensationalizing what had happened and for making up these stories in their belief. I understand that Eastern Airlines had motive to try and shove these stories down, especially like we talked about earlier. We're right in satanic panic and all of that. But these are employees who could have a broad range of experience, from drinking the corporate Kool-Aid and wanting to stick by them to possibly not being super happy with the company and what's going on with everything. Employees are probably going to be pretty honest. Not a single one of them believed the claims made by Fuller in Serling's findings. Serling had also done a bit of his own research into the Mexico City emergency landing. He found nothing supporting there being a sighting of the ghost of Captain Bob. Really, the only reporting from that pilot were from a brief from the Flight Safety Foundation, where that pilot was at a party a couple of weeks after the incident, and he just kind of jokingly said, "It felt like the ghost of Captain Bob was on the airplane with me." That is paraphrasing, not a direct quote, but that's what he said. That's really the only documented, case of that. Also, the whole story of the parts being rescued from that crash doesn't really hold any merit, according to Serling. There wasn't any evidence of parts actually being rescued. Like none of that was documented as far as he could find. And like I did some research on this. It is common practice to rescue parts from crashes, but only minor crashes. Crashes where the plane isn't really considered totaled. And there were even people who kind of thought, kind of based off of the angle that the nose hit the swamp water could have possibly left some parts available. But that plane was absolutely trashed.
Hey, Robert, can we put up a photo of this plane crash? Because to be fair, it is very much obliterated. But even in crashes that are pretty severe, I mean, my understanding is you can still salvage some parts. They don't have to be big parts.
You can look at that photo. That plane is absolutely,
it's pretty toast,
obliterated. And from the research that I did specifically on recovering parts from crashes, everything that I saw said that parts are rescued from more minor damage and instances where planes aren't totaled, basically. And that plane is fucking wrecked. And also, there was no evidence really supporting that claim, especially given the fact that a lot of the ghost stories were built on the parts from the original crash being used in new planes. The fact that that just doesn't really hold any water, to me, really debunks a lot of the story. Also, Rob Fuller's credibility, it's just not really adding up for me.
Well, I could see that. I do want to point out, Serling was not exactly a strictly nonfiction writer himself.
Well, right, but you can write fiction and still do some investigative writing.
And I'm not saying that you can't do both, but I also want to point out, we just need to consider that, first of all, we're talking about the 70s when everything was documented in an analog fashion. So it's not like you had computers, but not like you have today.
Absolutely.
So everything we're talking about documentation, this is all done by hand. And there's a much greater margin of human error there. Eastern had a very vested interest in suppressing any stories of hauntings. And there's no way that Sterling interviewed everybody. So, if you go in and say, hey, I want to interview some people about this, he had to get permission, obviously, to go and interview these people. Do you think that Eastern Airlines is going to let him interview people who actually were involved in these sightings?
Well, he possibly could have, unless it's some sort of like company sanctioned employee. You don't really need permission to talk to somebody about it.
But you do need to get records and know who works there in order to be able to know who to interview, for starters. Also, you have, like I said, it was the Satanic Panic, so the motivation to suppress any stories that came up would have been very strong. We say that the only documentation is from that one journal. That's the only documentation that we are aware of. We are not aware of any personal journals. We are not aware of any other documentation that might have been destroyed. I mean, it is very, very possible that some documentation could have been destroyed.
Which that is fair, but given my skeptic nature, I am going to go off of what is publicly available.
Which is fair, but I don't know. Considering that our actual government is burning the NASA library right now,
yeah,
that might be a dangerous position to take in the future.
Okay, it is. That's also our current government's issues.
Well, let's think about who was the president in the 70s.
70s, 80s. Well, Sterling's book was published in 1980. It goes.
But the records were all throughout the 70s. So the biggest problem is that none of the information it's neither verifiable nor disprovable.
Yeah.
And that's the problem.
That's the problem with a lot of these stories, which is why there are so many different camps of believers and skeptics.
And you don't have to firmly land in one or the other. You can be a skeptical believer.
Yeah. I will say, though, I'm usually just more of a skeptic. Lack of evidence does not prove the opposite.
Right. It does not preclude possibility.
Yeah.
For sure. And I think that with situations like this, We also have to consider things like, okay, I don't know if you watch Star Talk. Neil deGrasse Tyson.
Love him.
Love me some Neil deGrasse Tyson. There is an episode where he has a guest talking about the theory that the fabric of reality is literally woven together with wormholes. And his co-host said, hold on, I need some weed to get through this. Which is fair. What things we are learning at this stage, it is entirely possible that we're looking at time loops. It's entirely possible that we are looking at quantum travel. I mean, there's so quantum entanglement. There is just so much that we can't understand.
Especially when you get into the quantum shit. That shit gets freaky deaky.
Yes, it does. And so I personally can't fathom that these claims are totally baseless. That doesn't make sense to me that these would be totally baseless. I am not saying that they are 100% accurate either. I'm just saying that there is a lot of discussion that didn't come out of nowhere.
It came out of a book from an author with less than stellar reputation.
Well, reputation is very largely based on those who have the power to influence it.
Oh, right. But, like, based in, like, this guy was wrong about a lot of stuff. Like, that's where that reputation. You're not wrong there. I will give you that. But this guy specifically kind of sucks.
It just makes me think of like Randy Quaid in Independence Day, where everybody's like, he's nuts. And then, of course, he's the one that he's like, I've been telling y'all the aliens were coming. So
that wasn't Randy Quaid.
Who was it?
No, wait, never mind. You're right. I was thinking of 2012, which was Woody Harrelson.
I didn't watch 2012.
Yeah. But yeah, you're right. Randy Quaid was Independence Day.
I was pregnant in 2012. I was not watching a Doomsday movie.
Fair. Well, 2012 actually came out in 2011. So, but I just wanted to interject here because you're quoting Tyson. So I want to quote Sagan. Extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence.
Well, I do agree with that.
Like
but
we can't,
just because we don't have the extraordinary evidence presently doesn't mean that we cannot seek it.
When talking about ghosts do exist versus ghosts don't exist, the burden of proof lies on the person trying to make that claim.
Which is
not
fair.
on the opposite. Like, if you're trying to say this thing is real, that burden of proof falls on you, not the person saying that it isn't.
Don't you worry. We
prove
have...
to me there's not a teapot in orbit between the Earth and Mercury.
You can't prove a negative. So the issue that we find ourselves in here is,
which we probably will almost every episode.
Right. In this particular situation, it is just a mountain of hearsay. There is no photographic evidence. There is no audio evidence. But you know what? That's not always going to be the case.
It's not always going to be the case. And even then, sometimes photographs can be dubious on their own. So
especially in the year of our Lord 2026.
Right, but I do have some pre-AI. Oh, I've got so much up my sleeve. Don't you worry, baby.
But
you'll just have to like, follow, and subscribe in order to see what we've got coming. Because don't you worry, evidence is coming your way.
Okay. I'll sit here and wait, and we'll see. Mm. But yes, so at the end of the day, what even is information? who is credible and who is not? That is something that we, to this day, struggle, especially in modern times.
Especially in the advent of AI.
And I will like a primary source.
Yes.
So are you Team Spooky?
Or Team Skeptic?
Let us know in the comments. And while you're down there, you might as well let us know, are there any stories that you want to hear us cover?
And is there anything that we might have missed in our research? We're not perfect.
I am. He's not.
Okay. No. But yes, please, I would love to know your thoughts on what we've talked about here today, and if there's anything else you want us to cover. So
that's all we've got for you today. Thank you so much for spending this time with us, and we hope to see you next time. Here's Spirits on the Rocks.
Cheers. I got half of that on my shirt.